Chancellor, a lot of people think the whole renegotiation is basically just for show. Now, you're not going to persuade people who want to leave that it's more than that, but at least people who support the efforts you're making. I mean, what do you see in it that's actually important?
Well, look, there are some people in Britain who definitely want to leave the European Union and some people who definitely want to remain. But I think the majority want to stay in a reformed European Union, and that's why this renegotiation matters, because I think it offers the chance of a new settlement between Britain and Europe, where we're not part of ever closer union, where the Eurozone can't impose changes on us. They need our consent. And I think if we achieve that new settlement, then we will finally have put at ease that often fractious relationship between Britain and Europe.
Give me a practical example, though. Let's hold migration aside for a minute, because I'd like to talk more about that. But give me a practical example of what difference it makes.
Well, here's one practical example. Just before the summer, the Eurozone tried to land Britain with the bill for the Greek bailout, and that would have had an impact on British taxpayers. Now, we were able to stop it, partly because of agreements we'd already reached at a political level, but it was a close-run thing, and we need permanent changes so that British taxpayers don't bail out Eurozone countries. Here's another practical example. There are some businesses which were told they couldn't locate in Britain because Britain was not part of the Eurozone. Now, we've challenged that, but we want to enshrine it in the rules, and crucially, not just have it enshrined in the rules of the European Union, but have a safety mechanism that enables us to enforce those rules.
Right. So are you saying that this marks a significant rewriting of the relationship between Euro members and Euro non-members, for example?
Look, I think for me as a finance minister, at least the most important part of what we're trying to achieve is ensuring that Britain can operate alongside a Eurozone that is integrating and creating ever closer political and economic and financial union. Because Britain doesn't want to be part of that, and I don't want Britain to have to choose, as some have put it, between joining the single currency, something that we never want to do, and leaving the European Union.
I mean, you know how these negotiations are going. Have you made your mind up yet on how you're going to vote in the referendum?
Well, look, what I want to do is achieve a successful negotiation. That's one of the things I'm doing here in Berlin.
That goes without saying.
And if we can achieve that successful negotiation, then we can recommend to the British people that we can stay in this reformed European Union. But until the conclusion of that renegotiation, we leave, we rule nothing out, and that's perfectly reasonable.
You rule
approach.
nothing out. So you really, you, George Osborne, could actually recommend to the British people that we leave the European Union?
As I say, we rule nothing out. But I don't go into these things. David Cameron doesn't go into these things. My colleagues in the cabinet doesn't go into these things thinking we're going to fail. We want to succeed in these negotiations. And look, here in Berlin, just a few weeks before a crucial European Council, when we're going to make these decisions, I am pretty optimistic. I see the essential pieces of the deal falling into place. I think Britain is going to be able to achieve a more competitive Europe. I think we're going to be able to make sure that we're not part of that ever closer union. I think we're going to be able to secure our rights as a country that's not in the euro. And I think we're also going to be able to deal with the abuse of free movement and people travelling just to claim our welfare benefits. Achieve those things, and you are dealing with many of the major concerns that the British people have about the status quo in Europe, and that's a really big step forward.
Is the Treasury planning contingencies for Brexit, for Britain leaving?
No, the Treasury is 100% now focused on achieving the renegotiation. Well, that is where the resources of the Treasury are deployed.
It could be 6 months away from negotiating an exit. You're open-minded about whether we're staying in or going out, and you're not even preparing for it.
Look, as I say, our focus, our efforts are on making sure that we achieve a successful renegotiation. And I see, not just here in Germany, but in France, other key member states, in the European Commission, a consensus emerging that Britain has made a perfectly reasonable case for change, that this new settlement we're offering is not just better for Britain, but potentially better for the rest of Europe as well. So, I am optimistic, and that's one of the reasons we got this far is, by the way, because a lot of hard work has been done not just by the politicians, but the civil servants and the diplomats in this government to achieve this.
Okay, I mean, I just in the interest of clarity and plain speaking, most people who know you regard you as supporting British membership, and what you're saying is you're optimistic that you will be supporting British membership because you're optimistic that the negotiations are going well enough for you to recommend we stay in. So you wouldn't differ from what I've just said as a summary of your position.
Well, I put it in my own way,
okay.
Which is, I hope to be in a position to recommend that we remain in a reformed European Union.
Okay. We've repeated that enough.
I came into the House of Commons back in 2001. I'm a Eurosceptic, like many of my Conservative colleagues, because I've been concerned about some of the things that have happened in the European Union. That's why I want to make those changes.
Okay.
And, it's a perfectly respectable position to say, let's seek those changes, let's achieve those changes, let's have that new settlement, and then we can have the best of both worlds. We can be in the European Union, but not run by the European Union. To use an old and very apt slogan.
Let's talk about an issue which matters probably more at the moment on the continent of Europe, and more probably to the British people than the relationship between the Euro members and non-members, which is refugees, migration, flows of people. Now, in 2014, David Cameron implied that for Europeans to come to Britain, they would have to have a job. Then he implied for Europeans to come to Britain, if they were there 6 months without a job, they'd have to go home. It seems like all of that has been dumped, and we've got a much watered-down objective in terms of the migration objective of the renegotiation. Is that right?
Well, the objective we're seeking is the one we put in our manifesto that the British people voted on last year, which is to say you can't abuse the free movement of people just to come to our country and claim our benefits, and we need to address this unnatural draw.
But it has been watered down from things the Prime Minister said in 2014.
I don't think that's true, actually. David Cameron, when he originally set out in a speech at Bloomberg, why he felt a referendum was necessary, said we've got to address the abuse of free movement.
Steve Nicol of the Office for Budget Responsibility told a Commons Select Committee on the specific British proposal on curbing in-work benefits, he said it would have not much impact. Do you agree with him?
Well, I don't actually, although I respect...
Have you modelled the impact it will
Steve
have? Have you looked at the impact it will have?
The work that's been done, including by independent bodies like Open Europe, a respected think tank in this space, is that this will help reduce the flow of migration into the UK. But look, we're in the middle of the negotiation.
Will it get it down? Do you see European migration coming down post renegotiation?
I think if you remove the unnatural draw of our welfare system, if you avoid that abuse of free movement, then you will be able to reduce net
Will it
European
get it
migration.
Down to tens of thousands, which of course is the overarching objective of the government?
That is the overarching objective of the government.
Will this get it down to that?
It will contribute to it, but of
course,
hold on, the tens of thousands includes migration from non-EU countries. So we also take measures there to make sure that that's not abused either.
A lot of people have said, you've been very clever with the living wage proposal, putting up a minimum wage to maybe £9 or more by the end of the Parliament. If that helps British workers, it's going to be an enormous draw to Polish or other East European or Central European workers, isn't it?
Well, as I say, what we want are migrants who make a big contribution to our economy, who pay their taxes, and that's a good thing for our country. But we want that migration to be controlled, and we don't want our welfare system to be abused.
Right.
And that's why
So it's okay if they come for the minimum wage, as long as they're not coming for the in-work benefits. I mean, I just want to be precise here, because it sounds like you're saying yes if they're working, no if it's benefits. Is that the position?
I'm not saying that migration is per se a bad thing, right? Our country has benefited enormously, in my view, from immigration, but it has to be controlled.
It was interesting because on this issue of borders, which is clearly going to be a big part of the referendum campaign, Alan Johnson on our programme last night said, if we leave, you're not going to get your border back. He said on any plausible scenario about a new relationship with Europe and access to the single market, we will, like Norway and Switzerland, maintain free movement of people. Is that your view, that if we vote out whenever the referendum comes, we will probably end up with free movement anyway?
Well, I certainly agree with Alan that if you look at the other models that have been offered, like Norway and Switzerland and the like, there is open borders in the sense that's part of the deal that they have to sign up to. What I would say is Britain's got the best of both worlds. The reason why we don't have 1 million refugees or migrants flowing into our country in the way that Germany has had over the last years, precisely because we are in control of our borders. Britain didn't take part in Schengen.
It's a really basic question. Are we going to have a border or not after the referendum if we vote to come out?
But we have a border. I'd say,
are we going to have free movement? This is a really basic question, and we don't seem to have a clear answer to it.
As I say, we have a border today precisely because Britain is not part of Schengen, the free movement. We are not part of the single currency.
No, I know that.
And I think with these changes, we get that new settlement. No, but I think, look,
it's a really interesting question.
You raise a perfectly good question, which is, if it comes to the referendum and there are people advocating that we leave in that referendum, they are going to have to answer the question, what is the alternative? Are we going to have free movement of people? Are we going to have to pay into the European budget in order to have access to their market anyway? Are we going to have to sign up to their rules even if we don't have a vote on those rules? Those are all the things that countries like Norway face today, and they're going to be good questions to put during the referendum campaign.
Do you think the referendum is going to settle it?
I think it will for for at least a generation, probably for my lifetime.
Some people have talked about a second referendum a few years later.
I don't think that. Look, this is the vote. There's no second vote. Right? This is the vote. This is the crucial decision of our lifetimes. Do we stay in the European Union, a reformed European Union, or do we leave? And
so
I think anyone
and you have another chance to negotiate.
I think anyone who votes out on the assumption that a year or two later you can have another vote to vote back in, I think is being unrealistic about the nature of the choice. And I think it's really important the British people focus on the fact this is the once in a lifetime decision.
Last one, Chancellor. You're going around capitals in Europe. They're worried about migration, terrorism, Paris events, 10 Germans killed in Turkey in recent days. Don't they look at you and say, we've got bigger things to worry about than Britain's renegotiation?
Well, talking to Germans here in Berlin, German businesses, some of the German people I met here, the German politicians, that they understand many of Britain's frustrations. They share some of them. They want Europe to succeed. They want Europe to create jobs and growth. They want Europe to offer us all security. Let's achieve these reforms. Let's have that settlement so we can vote to remain in that reformed Europe.
Chancellor, thank you very much.